here with Ed Games and another episode of Slaying with Dice. Today we are going to be talking about Mystara with our guest, Glen Welch.
Hey.
He's going to be talking about a project that he's been working on for about 3 years. And we're going to go into a little bit of history of the Mystara setting, because a lot of people out there may not know about Mystara, although it does have deep roots in Dungeons and Dragons in the hobby. And then Glenn's going to talk about his conversion of this material to the 5th edition. So, and then also what his plans are, what his goals are with this material. So, without further ado, Glen, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's Mystara for the folks out there?
All right. Mystara is a setting for D&D. It was created in 1981, or at least it was originally put into print. It first appeared in Isle of Dread. It was written originally by Moldvay and Schick, who gave us a lot of famous modules, including White Plume Mountain. And back then, Gary was trying to rush Greyhawk out, but all he had was a city and some notes. They couldn't do Blackmore because Arneson was on his way out at the time. So they said, Moldvay and Schick said, hey, we've got a setting we've been working on. It's mostly analogies of real world nations, but with some elves and dwarves and halflings thrown in.
Okay, and so that's what they introduced as the D&D
Right.
known world, is
Right.
what they called it at the time, I remember back.
And it was the known world until they found out you can't trademark the name known world, so then it became Mystara, which was...
And that was the Isle of Dread module, I seem to recall, had a little world map in there or something like that,
It had
right?
a world map, and it had a brief description of all the nations that was
Like one page, right? It was
Yeah.
like one page with a little paragraph about each.
Right.
Okay, so I remember that now, yeah.
Yeah. And the setting, Mystara lasted from 81 to 96 when TSR hit the death spiral. And that was the last we saw of it. It died in 2nd edition.
Okay. So what is what as far as Mystara as a setting, what sets it apart from, say, like Forgotten Realms, Dragonlance, Greyhawk, etc.?
Mystara is about exploration and world building. In Greyhawk and Forgotten Realms, you go in, you dungeon crawl, you get the treasure. In Mystara, once you get to a certain level, they expect you to settle down and start managing part of the world for you. And in fact, it had extensive rules for managing domains or keeps or towns that you would be running. So, and another part of Mystara that was focused is most of the world wasn't explored. You had large amounts of wilderness inside the various nations, and nobody knew what was inside, or what was inside the nation that wasn't guarded. It was pretty dangerous. So the players had to go into a lot of areas and explore out and see what's actually in these areas. And that reflected a lot in quite a few of the modules, which were very sandboxy, like Isle of Dread or Savage Coast or Quagmire.
Okay. And as far as the layout of the world, or the cultures of the world, there's a lot, my understanding is there's a lot of areas that have analogies to real world.
Right. And that was one of the defining traits. Right? You had the Grand Duchy of Keramikos, which was Serbia, the Yugoslavians, or the Slavs. You had the Principalities of Glantry, which was fancy Yugoslavia because it had the French, the Germans, the Scottish, the Renaissance Italians, and you had Mongols, good elves, Spanish elves, and more, all crammed in one small nation, and they hated each other.
Okay.
Then you had other nations. You had Arabs and Vikings and Mongols, and they were
Yularum was the Arab?
Yularum, Ethengar was the Mongols,
okay.
Irindi were the Polynesians. So it was nations picked all over and sometimes they got obscure. Like there was one area where they were the Melanesians. They were dark skinned with blonde hair, which is unique to one island in the world.
Huh. So and then of course they had the demi-human sort of realms, like the Five Shires we talked about, which actually some of the original source material for that was written by Ed Greenwood. He did that particular book.
Yep.
But then there was like the Dwarves of Rockholm,
Right.
Orcs of Thar. These were all booklets that were done. These gazetteers. These were done as a series back in the late 80s, early 90s, right?
Yeah, I believe the last one ended in 89 because they dropped the nuke on the
Okay.
setting.
And that was in the Elves of Alfheim.
Elves of Alfheim. Then you had the Shadow Elves.
Shadow Elves, as you said, which are...
Not Drow.
Okay.
Yeah, they wanted to make they wanted to make their own elves rather than just bring in Drow. So they created a much more original version of the elves with pale skin and light hair and not evil but very naive. And they also added the Minorthad Guilds, which was, despite everybody being human on the cover, was largely an elven nation.
Interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
like sea elves and stuff like that?
Sea elves, wood elves. They also added dwarves and halflings, and it's kind of like a guild, a fantasy guild. They only not very nice.
Huh. A lot of great artwork on these old pieces too, like that.
It's all
Clyde Caldwell?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And some of it, he's proud of quite a few of these. I think his favorite was the Minorthad Guilds.
Yeah, they're very attractive. In fact, I think there's how many? 14 in the series.
14, yeah.
Yeah. So the original source material that's out there that was built upon when they really started to work on it there's 14 of these, and each of these actually these pretty thick booklets with maps, color maps.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, they also had
they added
some other stuff.
Yeah, they added the Hollow World because they wanted to make the setting even more over the top. So they hollowed out the world, and then they put in all these ancient civilizations that were stuck there, trapped in time.
Egyptians.
Yeah, ancient Egyptians, ancient Greek, Zulus,
Aztecs,
and then science fiction elves that were saved from the Blackmoor explosion.
Interesting.
They actually tied in Dave Arneson's Blackmoor setting because he was coming back to TSR because Gary was needing friends, and they said, write your Blackmoor setting and we'll put it in the distant past of Mystara.
And that was a series of modules. They actually put 4 modules or something like that.
DA 1 through 4. It was originally going to be DA 5, but the city of Blackmoor is vaporware. Apparently there's notes, but nobody's ever seen them.
Huh.
And Arneson got fed up and quit after the 3rd module, so he didn't actually work on the 4th module.
Interesting.
And so they set up everything. They actually added the creature crucibles, which gave you background. Well, they're kind of like gazetteers, but they weren't gazetteers. They added rules for the Fey folk. It added rules for the flying city of Serain, an underwater nation, and how to play werewolves and other tropes.
And I remember that was a series that came out too.
Right.
It's basically expanded some PC race options.
Right.
Too, yeah. For Dungeons and Dragons, but at the time they were also making them compatible with AD&D Second Edition.
That was Gary's idea.
Yeah. So, and then what else do we have? Well, we have a few other items.
Oh yeah. Well, they introduced Dawn of the Emperors, which was the 2 big nations. That introduced Thaddeus, which was a combination of ancient Roman, Byzantine, and then Alphatia, which was a highly magic-using nation. They were both empires that were kind of always at each other's throats, and they were the ones that threatening to level the world, trying to kill each other. And then you had the Champions of Mystara, which is a very nice box set. That compiled all the Voyage of the Princess Ark, which explored the realms outside of the known world. Because there was also the Savage Coast, and there's two other continents.
And that was a series of articles by Bruce Hurd originally in Dragon Magazine. I remember seeing a lot of those.
It's not a compilation of all of them, but it covers, I guess, when it got to the juicy parts. So you had this wonderful setting, and then they decided to release Wrath of the Immortals, which replaced the original Immortal rules and proceeded to blow up the setting, where they got rid of several nations, they crippled other nations, they got rid of several of the villains, and that's kind of the base breaker for the setting, and most people prefer not to play with that one.
So really, let's talk about what you're doing here with your 5e Player's Guide. So this is your 5th edition D&D conversion that you've been
Right.
working on. And so what you've done as far as the timeline here is you haven't included essentially like
Right.
this reset, which is
Yeah.
probably, for those of you familiar with a lot of setting information or settings in the 90s with TSR, like Greyhawk, they had From the Ashes, they had the Time of Troubles with Forgotten Realms. So they were doing like a reset where they were coming out with sort of this break. And really what it was a transition to AD&D 2nd edition for those particular settings. And so that it mixed a lot of things up. And so that's really what happens with the Wrath of the Immortals. It's sort of along that same vein. The difference here is that with that, I guess, is most of the stuff that was actually this was made for was what they sometimes refer to as BECMI, which is the basic expert companion masters immortals rule set, which was assembled in the rules encyclopedia by Aaron Alston. That was actually put in there. So that's where most of the Mystara lived as far as setting. It was in D&D, and that might be confusing for people who are newer to the hobby, because it used to not just be Dungeons and Dragons. There was Dungeons and Dragons, and there was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and we won't go into all the details here about that, but we're back to just Dungeons and Dragons now, and 5th edition. And so the material, you've taken all this material and incorporated it into here. Now, obviously, not all the details, but you've got the information, and I think you've also, you've got some, you've done a prototype here of it, including a map. This is a recreation of the known world. Now, one thing that the setting is known for is with the maps, at least, is it has these hexes, like this in the color code. These are by Thorfinn Tate.
Thorfinn Tate with Thorfinn Tate Cartography. He's a Finn, and he's probably the best fantasy cartographer that I know of. He put the maps inside the book on the grounds that I don't change a single pixel.
Okay.
Or else.
So there's several more of his maps in here that he's allowed.
Yes, he's got a map for every single nation. In fact, the grand map that you just showed, that's the first time it's appeared outside of his own work.
Oh, interesting.
He just put that together. It's the actual map online is, I believe, the size of the trail map, so about 6x4 if you tried to print it out.
That's pretty big.
Yeah.
This book, I mean, it's a beautiful book you put together here. It's got great art. This is something you've been working on for 3 years.
Yes.
So working on getting this all together, and actually, you paid for all this art?
Yeah. Per the rules on the
DM's Guild?
The DM's Guild, or I guess the OGL, or the
OGL.
Yeah. All the art I had to have license for, and rather than use some art and not know what the license is, I just kind of went in and got all of the art myself. Adrian Birkland did the art for the nations. There's some Rick Hershey art. He worked with Green Ronin. And yeah, it's there's I think about 20 to 30% of the initial book is nothing but fluff and background, giving you a feel of what each nation is like.
Yeah, it goes through, it's basically an overview I can see of a lot of things, but there's also things like cities of Mystara, so highlighting some of the major cities, centers of learning.
I didn't want to just have a name and not explain what it was. And then we had Rubus Rubelius did some of the art. He went for a kind of an old school feel, and Misha Selfromos did a lot of the character art.
Interesting. So I think the other things too is there's the calendar in here, crimes and punishment, coins of the known world, factions.
I included the factions because that seems to be important in 5th edition, mainly for the Adventurers League. But I wanted to just try to be expansive.
Oh, okay.
I added Mystara doesn't, because it's an older setting and because it has some special rules, it doesn't have all of the races of 5th edition.
Okay.
And I didn't want to try to shoehorn them in like Forgotten Realms does, so I took them out, but I replaced them with other races.
So, yeah, we have the races of Mystara, and of course, probably one, and it's actually already been introduced, is these are some specific Mystaran races, one of which some people in 5th edition may be familiar with, Turtles.
Yeah.
So the Turtle, which was released out there, it was I think it was on the DM's Guild. Was it charity or fundraiser?
Yeah, it was a charity.
This is a race that actually originates in Mystara. So
yeah,
some people may have already been playing with a little bit of Mystara, and not even realized it.
Yeah, they were showcased in the Dungeon Magazine adventure Turtles of the Purple Sage.
Huh. I don't remember that. Yeah, the classes of Mystara. So you have classes in here, and it's going over specifics of 5e classes, existing ones, but it looks like also there's some new archetypes in here.
There's 32 archetypes.
Okay.
I included one of everything except for the monk, because the Mystaran monks, which are oddly enough called mystics in Mystara, fit in too well with the 5th edition, so I wasn't going to try to reinvent the wheel. I included a lot of every special race that was in Mystara I turned into an archetype.
Horse warrior for a fighter archetype, obviously from Ethengar.
Yeah.
Is it Godai or Godai?
Yeah. They didn't exactly come up with a pronunciation.
That's the Northern Reaches, so there is a Norse area in the world.
Last for the Scottish.
Merchant Prince. And these are all, they're not brand new character classes, but in a lot of cases they're just, really what they are, they're just ways to take those existing 5e classes and with new archetypes, make them, which is one of the nice things about the 5e system.
One of the things I did is I tried to break the 5e system as far as it has a lot of, like, fighters are supposed to be in full plate, and they've got some light fighters in here. You've got some of the different takes on wizards. Some of the 5e subtypes, like the sorcerers, don't do well in Mystara, because Mystara magic does not have wild magic. They have Radiance, and they have really stable magic to the point of it's a science.
Okay. New backgrounds for 5e, which are always nice, and a couple of new feats. Looks like some information there on Gladiator, and of course the Pantheons of Mystara, the Immortals of Mystara. So
that was donated by Marco Del Monte. He did that originally with the Codex Immortalis. I took it in, edited it for size, because the Codex Immortalis is twice the size of this book.
Wow.
And I did a little bit of editing for that one, because English is not his first language, unfortunately.
So these are all the Immortals, the Deities of Mystara. Basically 2 pages worth there in a list, and then it goes into some details, obviously, about each of them there.
One difference between Mystara and other worlds is Mystara doesn't have gods. They have mortals that have completed a great quest and have been turned into these immortals, which lets them shape the world. And that's another aspect that's different, is when you get to a high level, you're trying to gain the attention of the other immortals. They give you a quest. You succeed on the quest, you join them. New cleric domains.
Okay.
And then you have the Radiance. The Radiance is a magical radiation that's unique to Mystara. It makes for very powerful magic. The only problem is if you use it too much, it is radiation. You will get sick and die.
Nordic rune magic in here.
Yes.
Some new spells.
Most of those came from the Monty Cook's remake of Glantry, because Monty Cook can't make a book without adding spells to it.
Let's see, some entertainments of Mystara, including rules for, looks like, jousting. Information on some magic items there.
Right, magic items, things that you can buy.
Okay.
Mystara, actually Glantry mass produces magic items for sale. Something different from 5th edition. 5th edition doesn't want you to buy magic items, and Glantry puts them in Walmart. And they actually have, in one of the things that's mentioned in their in their school of magic is all students have to create a magic item to sell.
So back to.
Yeah, and the back art was Abgi Kaneka, another Greek artist.
So this is, it says it's 224 pages. It's full color right here. Now this one, you said in this volume is a little larger than what you want the finished thing would be.
Well, right. If you put it next to
probably something more like this dimension.
Right. You can see it's slightly larger. We were testing the printer. The paper stock's also a little thicker, which makes the book a little thicker.
So the finished product that you hope to get out there is going to be a little thinner than this and a little bit smaller, more in line with the existing size of the 5e rule books and stuff like that.
I deliberately made the Mystara book larger than the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. Okay. I think it's 50 pages larger.
Yeah, and so this is not like an exhaustive. So let's talk about that. That leads us into, let's talk about your goals. So right now, your primary goal is to get this on DM's Guild, right?
Right. I want to get permission from Wizards of the Coast to put it on the DM's Guild, or if they like it enough because it fits every condition that they gave for a book, that to get it out on shelves, if possible. I mean, that's...
so what you're looking at is the fact that for people who may not be aware, DM's Guild allows you to either download PDFs or this is through RPG Now, and it's something that's sanctioned by Wizards of the Coast. They have partnered up with the DM's Guild so that people can produce their own items that they put together, and then they split the profits basically with Wizards of the Coast. But the trick is that it's limited on what you can actually put up there, and right now there's a short list of settings. I think it's Forgotten Realms and Ravenloft, Eberron. I think Eberron just now because they finally released an Eberron book, and I think you can put Greyhawk up there yet?
No, they announced Greyhawk as a setting in their sidebar, but when you try to put up a book, they don't allow it yet.
Okay.
Greyhawk just had Saltmarsh come out, so.
That's true.
Coming out. And then Dragonlance is again on the sidebar, but you can't put out Dragonlance. But I mean, Dragonlance was, as far as the D&D settings, Dragonlance was a 300-pound gorilla for 20 years.
Yeah. So we're hoping that what the goal here of in part going over this today, and I know you've been out there talking with other people, is to try to just get a notoriety and hopefully get some people's some momentum behind it, and if you are interested in seeing this at least be available on the DM's Guild, then drop a line through the DM's Guild probably, or Wizards of the Coast directly, email their customer service or call them and say, hey, we want to see Mystara available so that Glen here can at least put that product out there, and other people too can start to add some things for this setting, which there's a lot of information for, and then, but as you said, if they like it enough, if they want to take a look at this product that you have here, you'd be more than willing, obviously, to see it take the route of, say, like as you talked about with Eberron, and something they've done there. So that would be very cool.
Yeah, Wizards is a company. I show them that there is a market for this and a large enough market. Then it makes sense for them monetarily to expand on it.
And then obviously too, if we can get it opened up, what you've talked about, if you can at least get it onto the DM's Guild and have the ability to do that, then you can take some of these other setting information for each of these, and actually people can start to produce information, and you'd like to see about maybe even expanding and creating books that are analogous to these old gazetteers, drawing out information, but updating them for 5th edition, so people can do that.
Yeah, there's 17 nations. You have 3 box sets. You can't touch the Blackmoor because that's a licensing issue. But you've got their monster manual had 300 monsters that haven't really been touched on. You mentioned the Tortle. I think they brought back the Choker was originally Mystara. They brought that up. But yeah, there's 300 monsters that Mystara put out that have never been converted past second edition. So that would be a book. That would be several books.
So there's a lot of information out there that's just really waiting to be updated to 5th edition. Okay, so, well, with that in mind, keep that in mind. If you want to see more of this, because right now you can't see this other than if you speak to Glenn directly, he shows you this book. But if you want to be able to actually see this available, reach out to the customer service at Wizards of the Coast and DM's Guild and let them know that we want to see Mystara available as a setting online. Yeah. So thanks again for joining us today. We look forward to some further episodes of Slaying with Dice. And if you want to come down to have adventures with RPGs and, like I said, adventure board games, come join us down at Eden Games and Hobbies in Humble, Texas, and Albuquerque, New Mexico. Take care. Dice throwers and